Hello, and welcome to Mentor Dino. I'm your host, Katelyn Rossier. I am an architect and founder of Mentor Dino. I firmly believe that architecture, engineering, and construction professionals can achieve true success by embracing human skills as their guiding principle. So each week, I interview amazing professionals in and around the AEC industry as a way to share stories, inspiration, and advice for others finding their own unique career path. Thank you to all of our current subscribers, and if you're new, we'd love to have you join our community. So if you like this episode, please do me a favor and hit subscribe, like, or leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support them on their own career journey. So let's dive in. I really hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome to the Mentor Dino podcast. I would like to welcome Stefanie Reichman. She is a civil engineer and customer success manager at Bluebeam in Las Vegas, Nevada. Thank you so much, Stefanie, for taking the time to speak with me today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited to be here. I was really excited when you reached out on LinkedIn and looking forward to this conversation today.
Yeah, so let's start out with the loaded question for anybody who doesn't know who you are and a little bit about kind of your backstory. Do you mind letting us know a little bit about your experience and journey so far between your education and your career?
Sure. Yeah. This is always such a loaded question, but I'll do my best to kind of weave the story together. But I'm originally from New York, and I did my undergrad out there. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. Actually considered architecture for a really long time. And then when it kind of came down to it, a couple of different reasons made me choose civil engineering. But as I was wrapping up my undergrad degree, I realized I didn't really love structures and didn't really want to go into design, but I was kind of too far into that degree. So I did, the most logical thing, which is get a master's in civil engineering as well, but kind of focusing on construction management because I thought that was really my life's calling. And then worked for an engineering company as an assistant project manager after I graduated. And then realized after 10 months, it was in fact not my calling and not really what I wanted to do. Got an incredible opportunity to work for a general contractor out in Las Vegas, Nevada, which is where I currently live, to start a virtual design and construction department for them. It was a really cool opportunity, couldn't pass it up. So moved out to sunny Las Vegas and worked there for a couple of years and had a baby during kind of that COVID times and decided to kind of reevaluate what I wanted and what was important to me and what I wanted my career to look like now that I was a mom. And that's ultimately what led me to do this kind of big career shift, pivot, whatever we really want to call it. And eventually led me to Bluebeam, so transitioning from construction to tech, working as a customer success manager, which I had never really even heard that term before. And I've been there for a little over a year and a half now. And it's been an incredible opportunity, just fantastic pivot that has given me a lot of freedom and a lot of things that I really was looking for in that role. So we can certainly dive more into that. But that's kind of the really long story of where I've been and where I'm at now.
Yeah. And I know I very much understand like the construction management route, but when you pivoted to that virtual design and construction role, what was that role? What were you doing over there?
Yeah, so the role was really centered around a lot of clash detections. So the use of Navisworks, the use of Revit. I actually taught a Revit course as part of my master's. So for 3 semesters, I taught students how to use Revit and Navisworks. So it wasn't that random to kind of get that type of role. But yeah, it was a lot of clash coordinations, but then also a lot of more technological projects, if you will. For example, I started and then grew a drone program from no pilots to, I think it was 5 or 6 by the time I left, so that the drones could be utilized for monitoring safety design choices, marketing materials, just a whole slew of things. So it was really, and just like that, there were a couple other more technological kind of projects that were being considered. And I was the one that was kind of championing those, taking a look at which softwares might make sense to consider, and then working on the implementation of those as well.
Gotcha. So more processes, but clash detection's a whole nother process that we're dealing with all the time.
Yes.
I was just on one today, and it was just like, okay, hit this again and it's fine.
Yes, it was a really cool. It was a really cool role in that I got to be really technical, especially in the clash coordinations, but then could also really zoom out quite a bit in doing presentations with like investors or developers and explain to them the value of the clash detection and what that process could bring to their project, or what the use of drones or some of the other initiatives we were running could bring to them. Because essentially, we were presenting something and saying, "You like this? Now you got to pay for it."
Yeah, definitely. And you didn't mention this on your path, but I know you did get your PE. And so I kind of wanted to touch on why you decided to go that route. And for those that already have their PE, that it's okay to still pivot your career after you've gone through the education and getting your license. So what got you to get your license, and what advice do you have for those others?
Sure. This is quite the another really great loaded question. So for me, I've always heard the term PE when I was in school in my undergrad. It was like the gold star, the elite, the best of the best got their PEs because it was so hard and so complicated. And that has always kind of resonated in the back of my mind as just a credential, just a way to kind of identify yourself as knowledgeable in the field, or to have a credential. And so it's always been a personal goal of mine. It was never something, none of my roles have ever required it. I've never done engineering. I like to say I'm never done a day of engineering, have worked in those realms, but I've never done any of it myself. And then it was COVID. And I was actually scheduled to take the exam the April of 2020. And then, got canceled like a month before, which anyone who's ever studied for the PE, you know that like, this is not the type of exam you study for a month in advance. Like, I had been preparing quite a bit up to that moment. So to get that email saying like, oh, we're actually going to cancel the exam was difficult. But yeah, it was all kind of a very much personally driven goal. I never had the intention of getting the PE and then, start doing something with it. It has always just been something that I wanted to do and felt like this was the time before I had a family to really start to complete that before I kind of move on to another stage of my life. I also failed it the first time, which isn't something I talk about very often. But I did fail it the first time, which was incredibly hard. Obviously, anyone who might have ever failed an exam like that probably understands exactly what that feels like. And I think it was really about just reminding myself how badly I wanted it. And again, it was, incredibly personally motivating to me because it wasn't something that my job was necessarily requiring.
I know we don't talk about failing exams enough in the AEC industry. It is not like everybody assumes everybody else is passing the first time through. And so people don't want to talk about struggles through the exam or when their exam gets canceled. Like, I didn't have COVID hit me during my architecture exams, but I had a hurricane come through the Northeast, and it didn't even really hit Pittsburgh that bad. But because it hit Philadelphia bad, they shut down all the testing centers in the entire state of Pennsylvania. And like, you were studying so much, and then they pushed the exam out like a little over a month. And I had to go try making calls to people to reschedule. And it's like, it wasn't a COVID scenario, but when you spend time to study it, and back then I had 7 exams I had to hit, I'm like, no, I don't want to delay this a month because then it's going to delay everything else. And I just want to be done.
Yeah.
But
I think it's incredibly challenging. And to that point, it's one of the reasons I started posting on LinkedIn, because very often I would find myself in this, whether it was about the PE or just general kind of industry things that would happen. And I would often struggle with, is this normal? Is it me? Is it the company? Is it the manager? Is it the industry? But most often than not, I would just have this sinking feeling that it was me, that there was something wrong with me, because there wasn't anybody that I felt like was similar to me, that I could relate to, that was on a similar kind of path that I was on. Maybe I wasn't looking hard enough. That's definitely very possible. But I think there's definitely been a lot lacking, especially in the construction and even the engineering field. So a lot of that really motivated me to post on LinkedIn. It's kind of funny because today I actually decided to post about the time I failed the PE exam, which was something I didn't really want to post about because it's embarrassing, maybe a little bit. It was embarrassing to me. It's kind of like hard to admit, but it's the truth. And it kind of just felt right to say, like, as I'm growing my platform, I don't want to give off this kind of idea that, everything has come very easily to me, because that's not really the case.
yeah, no. And I think it's important just to say it, because even if you're embarrassed, that may help somebody else. I know I'm still running an ARE series on my blog side that I'm going to be fizzling out, but there's been a number of people that failed like over 10 exams on the architecture side, and I was embarrassed on the 2 I failed. And so seeing these stories come in, and like I've cried reading through some of them, because like when you feel that pain and you have that connection, it's different. So it's like just understanding everybody's been through it, and if anybody is failing an exam or struggling, you'll probably talk to somebody in your office and they likely failed an exam as well. Yes. That they can help you with it. So
yeah, it's funny because it's not that funny, but my mom would always tell me this story of someone she went to school with who went on to be a doctor, and he essentially like failed every year of med school, but he just did it twice. But it doesn't matter. He's a doctor, Yeah. And I think that has always kind of stuck with me, especially like as I was struggling to kind of like pick myself back up after the exam. It was like, nobody would ever know that I didn't pass it the first time. I mean, I'm choosing to share that, but nobody would ever know. There's no way to guess, or like there's no mark on my, stamp that says failed the first time. So I think that's sometimes something that we kind of lose track of, that like nobody really knows unless you choose to share it.
Yep.
So
yeah, it's just a general stamp, and then on the actual license it tells you the year, and that's about it. It doesn't tell anybody when you started studying. It doesn't tell people how long it took you, or how many fails, or what life events happened in between there to cause any struggles, or if you were that doctor that took every exam twice.
Exactly. Yeah. It looks something like this after I passed. And when I was setting up my home office for my remote job, I didn't really know what to hang behind me. And it just felt really fitting to put my diplomas up there, because especially this one, which is the PE one, felt extra special just for that reason.
And I think it's important that it's a credential, but it's a completion of your education too, to just kind of, there's graduation, but I always feel like that licensure part's kind of that like last step in the education to like a chapter you finished. So it's closing a door for you. Yeah. And giving you that kind of recognition that you deserve, because you did go through that process.
Yeah. So. That's fair. No, it's always a good reminder of what I like to use this for is to remind myself that I can do hard things, because this was really hard. So if you kind of like, once you start comparing other things to this, it's like, I can do hard things.
Yeah. You'll be fine.
Exactly.
But going off on closing one chapter and starting another, I know since you've pivoted your career kind of into that tech Bluebeam world, what advice do you have for someone that says, but I don't know what else I can do with my engineering degree?
This is like my favorite and most hated question.
Love-hate relationship.
Yeah, a very love-hate relationship. I love it and hate it because I struggled with it so much myself, where it's like you have this incredible degree, whether it's engineering or architecture, whatever it might be. And you have built up this career capital, these skills that you feel like you can bring to other places, but you don't really know where or how. And I spent a lot of time in that space trying to figure out, like, what can I really do? What would fulfill me? What would make me happy? What would I enjoy doing? And I think for anyone that's kind of on that path, I think it has to be a lot more of an introspective conversation in regards to like what you enjoy and just being really brutally honest with yourself of what your must-haves are and what your nice-to-haves are, just like buying a house. And then once you do that, you just do a ton of research and just talk to a bunch of people. I think the networking piece of this seems to always be very much lacking, because that's what I ended up doing. I had in my previous role worked with so many different softwares that I actually just went back to all those. They were account managers mostly. Connected with one specifically who had previously worked at Bluebeam, and he said, "Listen, like, I wasn't really sure that I felt right working in a sales role. That felt a little bit too much for me." And they suggested, like, what about a CSM kind of role? And then I ended up talking to somebody on the CSM team, and they said, like, yeah, like we love people with industry experience, which for me, all I could think of was, why would Bluebeam want someone like me? So it was such a like mismatch of expectations between like what I thought the company wanted and what the company actually wanted. And then of course you need to have a little bit of luck and timing. They ended up having a spot of the team available, so I was able to interview for that. But there's lots of different opportunities like that where your skills as, an engineer architect would work so well. The CSM role, I think, has been getting a lot of popularity recently. But there's roles within the product organization. There's a lot of consultant type positions available as well. And all this to make a kind of pitch for myself and what I'm trying to build as well here is, I actually put together a guide that kind of walks through that whole process, because for this exact reason, I think you would kind of end up in this role where you're like, I don't know what to do next. Can someone just like light the way for me? And I wish I had that when I struggled to kind of figure out what to do next. So couldn't find any decent resources out there or any resources that kind of talked about how to make this type of transition. So I wrote a 4-part guide to cover exactly this, like how to figure out what you want to do, and then, the alignment of your LinkedIn and resume to it, and then how to talk about it in an interview so you don't end up at the interview and you're like, yeah, I don't really have any experience, but you should take a chance on me.
Yeah. Hey, I'll say, like, my husband went into a job interview and they're like, hey, like, he's more not a PE electrical, but he's more electrically trained, and he went for a mechanical position. And they're like, what do you know about mechanical? And he said, nothing. And still got hired. And I'm like, this is amazing to just see like people wanting individuals with different unique experiences coming in to give a different perspective. So even when you apply for a role, you may think it's one thing, but they may be needing something different, and creating that experience diversity on a team is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to make sure that you kind of tell that story. I've definitely also gotten into interviews where I've said, like, I don't know anything about this. And I did actually get those roles too. But I think it's hard when you isolate just that one phrase, because there's so much more to the person. And I think, showing that you're a self-starter, that you're interested, that you're motivated, that you're ready to learn. Like all those skills are skills that you're building up, hopefully, regardless of the type of role, the type of company you're at. And those are really important skills that you can then leverage into any other role that you might be applying for. So I think it's really important to kind of think about the skills that you've developed that can actually translate really well into other industries.
Yeah. So when you were going through that pivot, were there particular things that you found you were really latching onto, and how did those connect to what you do as a CSM role?
Yeah, I think more than anything, what I really enjoyed of my the previous role working with the general contractor was I really enjoyed the implementation and enablement piece of it. So once the decision was made on the software, how can I kind of best get people up to speed on it, and working with those people that hopefully were interested and excited to kind of implement those software. So the CSM role lets me do that as a job. So it kind of perfectly aligned with exactly what I wanted to do, in that I'm able to work with customers and kind of teach them new features or work through their workflow with them, maybe make it better or optimize it, or really work with them on whatever goals they're trying to achieve. Of course, no job is perfect. So this is just like the piece of it that I enjoy most, that I get to do a lot of in my current role.
Yeah. So are you more me just being dumb and not knowing what a CSM generally does? So are you doing sales, or are you like after a salesperson gets a new account, then you come in to help? All right, what does your company need? What process, onboarding, training? Like,
Yeah.
Where do you fit? If I even have that right, you can completely correct me wrong if I have the process.
No, that's not wrong. I'm struggling on how to answer this because every company does treat the CSM a little bit differently. So at Bluebeam, it is kind of a post-purchase. So as a CSM, we kind of work with like active accounts of certain sizes. So and then we work with their end users on training. If they're onboarding new team members, we kind of do assist with portions of that. So kind of depends. Different companies do different things, but we work alongside account managers who deal with like more the traditional sales pieces of it. So that's why I said like I was too scared to do full sales role. That wasn't exactly what I wanted. So this is kind of like sales adjacent.
Yeah. And you get to help with all the processes and getting people up to speed that you liked before too.
So. Yeah, exactly. The role's also just given me a lot of flexibility to be really creative, which is something I didn't really realize how much I love just being really creative. Meaning we have goals that we're kind of expected to hit, but in terms of how we get to those goals is entirely up to us. So for example, like with the customers that I work with, I actually write a newsletter. I never thought that I would enjoy writing a newsletter because I've never really been one to write, but I've been kind of writing a lot more on LinkedIn and posting more of my thoughts on there. So the idea kind of came of like, what if I started doing this for the customers I work with? And so different like small initiatives like that have allowed me to kind of bridge together the technical side, but also the creative side, which is kind of a tricky balance to hit, I think, especially like with the background that I have.
Yeah. And I know I haven't seen a newsletter minus like maybe Autodesk sending out their like crazy email blasts whenever a new software comes out with all their updates for the new year. But I need to jump in on a Bluebeam one, so I may sign up for your newsletter even though I'm not a direct customer.
That's fair. Yeah, no, it's really exciting, I think, to be able to bring that kind of value. And I think it's maybe people can tell us in the comments or whatnot. I think it makes it kind of different when you know who it's from, and not from like a generic, Bluebeam email address. Like it's coming, like I write it for you. I'm sending it. So hopefully that feels a little bit more personalized to the recipient. I hope.
Yeah.
That's my intention anyway.
And you never know. Like, yeah. I've used Revit for since before graduating high school, and I still learn something new every day. And I
Yes.
think I've been using Bluebeam like 8 years now. I'm trying to remember,
Yeah.
but I love the software. So I think it's fascinating, and I love that they actually have people with industry experience within their teams, because then they get a little bit more of that regular day to day. Hey, here's issues people are seeing, or if I bring in an issue, you kind of understand what I do. It's a lot harder with somebody that's just on the coding side. You almost need that middle translator if
Yeah.
there's an issue or workflow.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, it's funny because at the time, again, when I was kind of looking for a job, I never considered that that actually is my greatest strength, is that I had that industry experience. So, yeah, I think it's funny sometimes when I introduce myself I'll mention that I have a PE or that I came from the industry, and a lot of customers will immediately say something like, "Oh, okay, so I don't have to explain things to you. Like, you just get it." And that's kind of what I'd like the relationship to be.
Hey, it does help it go a lot smoother.
Yes,
So.
though I will say the software can be like, there's so many things you can do with it. We do a lot of like one-on-ones with end users, and I've yet to have the same person ask me the same question twice. Like, it's been over a year and a half, and I get stumped all the time with questions because like it's just so complicated, and people just like push and pull the software so much, which is super exciting. But sometimes you just gotta say, I don't know. I'll get back to you.
Yeah. And
Which is
that
okay.
alone is great advice in
Yeah.
any career.
Yes. It's okay to say you don't know.
Yeah. So what is it like in general working for Bluebeam? And I also knew you're a fully remote employee, so that gives a little different flair to how you're working.
Yeah, so it is fully remote. That was something that was really important to me kind of in the stage of life when I kind of joined the company. I've got a 2-year-old, so kind of do the math. He was pretty young. And it just gave me the opportunity to be the employee and the mom that I wanted to be. The idea of like the commute was really challenging for me, but also living in Las Vegas, there was less opportunities than in a larger city. And I had moved my family here for the Las Vegas opportunity. Didn't really want to get into this routine where we just move around that much. It's just kind of challenging. So yeah, working remote for me has been great. Like I said, I'm an incredibly creative person. And for me, sometimes when I really get stuck on a problem, there's nothing quite like going outside and taking a walk. I know that sounds incredibly cliche, but for the month of April, Bluebeam actually did a wellness challenge. So it's not mandatory, you just sign up for it. You kind of get placed into teams and have certain miles that we actually all compete to get the most miles within the month. So I didn't want to let my team down and made sure to go on at least one walk a day. I will say, and I've kept it up, it's like mid-May right now. So since the beginning of April, it's getting kind of hot here in Vegas. So I don't know how much longer this is going to go. But I think I've been the most creative that I've been in the last like 6-7 weeks, just going on daily walks. So just like more interesting LinkedIn content. Hopefully my LinkedIn followers agree with that. I don't know. I felt better about it. And also just like more creative at work with like being able to tackle some different things as they've come up. So that's been my experience working from home, but I know that different people feel differently about it. But for me, it's really given me a lot more balance in my life.
Yeah. But I think probably two important parts you touched on was your family, and you being having a young child creates different stresses on the family, and getting to and from, having to be places, they get sick, and then COVID and daycare, and God forbid a kid sneezes and the daycare facility is getting closed. Like, the young parents that I work with are always dealing with these struggles, pushing and pulling them, that it's like sometimes if they can just be at home, regardless if their kids are in daycare or not, they can have the heads down time to focus whenever something has to pull them a different way and shift. But the other component's location. Like, you don't want to pick up and move your family every couple years if you're going to change jobs every few years. And I think the opportunities of fully remote employment gives people opportunities to work for companies that aren't in their local region, but at the same time gives companies opportunities to get great professionals like yourself that aren't located right in their city or have their unique experience to help build them up. So I know there's a big push to bring everybody back to the office, but I think remote employees also have their own benefit for the employee and the employer that everybody should keep in mind.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's more than anything about there being a conversation around what's best. And I know that obviously there's pros and cons to both pieces, and I get that, and I'm fully kind of on board. And I think for different people, it makes very much sense to be in office. But yeah, I mean, I can't. Bluebeam's doing it right with how they're treating their remote employees, and I really appreciate that. I'm on a fantastic team. My managers all have kids. My team, a lot of them have kids. They kind of understand what that looks like. And I think that that's really important. In previous roles, I wasn't really surrounded by a lot of parents. At the time, I wasn't a parent or I was pregnant. And I think I kind of felt more of that when I was pregnant was, oh, like people around me don't really understand what's happening. And I think that was really, really challenging. So when I was interviewing at companies for, the role that I have now at different companies, that was really important for me to ask, like, do people have kids? Like, I have a kid. Am I going to feel like the weird one? Because it's like, this is the stage of life that I'm in. And I think having those conversations was really important. I'm sure some employers may be passed on me because I mentioned it. I don't know, maybe. I'll never find out. But yeah, I think it's certainly an interesting conversation that's going to continue. It's going to be interesting to see kind of how the world moves forward with the whole remote work in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. And I wouldn't discount the question either. Like, I know you're not supposed to bring up family things in an interview, but hey, if it crosses me off a list and I don't say yes to your offer and then instantly regret it, it saves you time, it saves me time. So I'd rather be open and honest in the questions, and definitely asking about the people that are currently there is important. And especially if you're remote, like it takes a little bit longer to build those relationships virtually because you have to make calls, or if the team has regular meetings, like they have to have their process in place to make it engaging for remote.
Yeah.
And if you're going to go the in-office route where it just happens and you assume things will happen, then it won't.
Yeah.
So definitely a mindset shift with the team you're on. So
yeah. And I think it's challenging when you're interviewing because you typically just really want a job pretty badly. So I think that's why it's kind of important to not skip that more introspective stage. For me, like I really identified early on that remote work was the only thing I was really willing to do at that time. I wasn't interested in going into the office, even if it was a great opportunity. I just wasn't ready for that. And so making that, one of my top requirements really shifted a lot of conversations because the salary didn't really become that important to me because like I knew what my number one most important item was on my list. So,
yeah. And you're touching on a lot of the resources you've created. So I know you've got the pivot guide. I know you also have a career pivot checklist. And then I believe you also review resumes.
Yes,
as well.
I also do resume reviews, and I do some coaching, which one-on-one coaching, it's a little tougher to do those just because my time is really limited. But I do that with customers that kind of feel like they just really need that type of attention, which I think is totally fair and justified. certainly trying to think of like other ways to kind of help support the community, especially through this, like what I think is a really vulnerable stage where you're really wanting to do something different. You've probably got all these pressures to figure out what to do, but you just don't know how to get there. You just know you want to get there. And for me, the most important thing is kind of creating a one-stop shop where you can kind of work through the whole process without saying like, oh, like you have to buy this guide and then that guide and then that guide. Because the checklist is totally free. And the guide is kind of the paid option, which kind of walks you through the whole process. But yeah, it's just the beginning for me. So I'm excited to see kind of what that all leads to and what happens with it. But yeah, launched the guide a couple of weeks ago, and people have been giving some great feedback, which makes me feel awesome. It's exactly what I did to pivot. Did the big pivot from general contractor to tech, but also did that pivot from an engineering role to a construction role. So two pivots, two different experiences to kind of weave into that guide.
Yeah. So what were your top must-haves?
For my current role, my number one probably was the remote aspect. There's certainly a salary piece that was important to me. I feel like anyone who says otherwise is maybe lying. And then after that, it really became, I wanted to make sure that I was a right fit with the team I was working with, particularly with my manager. I knew that I knew this was going to be a new role for me, that I would have a lot to learn. And I wanted to make sure that I felt supported by not only my manager, but also the team, so I could grow into the role, which I'd never considered the fit with the company quite in that way. It was more like, oh, my values kind of align, but never like, can I really work with this manager or with this team? And so I really used the interviews as a way for me to be interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing me, just so I could really get as much of a sense for the team as I could. And yeah, they didn't lie. So it's been over a year and a half, and I still love working with all of them. So that was probably, those are the three things, but I would say maybe not exactly in that order. They were all kind of equal importance.
Yeah. Like you always have your number one based on wherever you are in life. And salary is always up there, but I think a lot of employers assume that that's the only thing people care about. And it's really not. I know when I went over to work with a contractor for a little bit and pivoted out, and I ended up hating it, but not so much for the contractor side, but more the people and the atmosphere that was there I didn't like, and I didn't interview enough to figure out that culture piece. And pivoting back into architecture, I knew I was going to take a pay cut. And so it was like, all right, well, as long as it's a positive from the architecture firm I left before going to the contractor side, then I'm good. But when I left architecture originally, I was so burnt out. And so work-life balance and paid time off were actually more important to me. And that was pre-COVID. So now it's like, well, I'm sorry, flex work is one of the top things on my list if I ever want to change jobs again, and potentially full remote. Who knows?
Yeah.
But it's important to know that everybody's preferences are different, and it's okay if your preferences change as well.
Yeah, I think that's kind of really the core of my mission, is giving somebody the permission to unlock themselves to other opportunities. Because for me, when I was in my undergrad, I didn't really feel like I had options. It was either go into structural engineering, which is where the good students go, or go work for a general contractor where the rebels go. And because there was more money, so the rebels went there. This was kind of what I was told for 4 years. And so I went to work for an engineering company as a project manager, but still that kind of environment. Didn't like it. So I went to go work for a construction company. And then after a couple of years, I didn't like that for different reasons. So then you kind of end up at this juncture where you're like, well, there are only two things that I could do with my degree. I've done them both and I don't like them, but I'm still kind of need income. So what do I do? And I think it was giving myself permission to say, like, yes, you do have a master's in civil engineering, and yes, you are a PE, and neither of those things are a requirement for your role as a CSM at a tech company, but you're going to love it. So give yourself the permission to make that pivot because you'll just enjoy it. And that's enough. You don't have to do something that you're miserable doing just because you're scared of the optics or you're scared of like telling people that you've pivoted out. It's not like it's not a dirty word. It can be incredibly positive. So I think that's really the core of what I'm really trying to do is kind of show people that that's okay. It's been fine. It's been fantastic for me. Just open yourself up to the possibility that it's either you, there's something wrong with what you're doing at a company. It's either your company or it's the industry. And so once you've kind of decided which of those it is, then you can kind of move forward with that. And if it is the industry, then a pivot might need to be the next logical step. And just accept that and then make the plan and then work the plan.
Exactly. And I know even you list on your LinkedIn that Bluebeam's your dream job. And the fact that you can be so happy and excited, like I've lost track on what interview number this is, but I know we mentioned before this current week at the time of the podcast will be the 30th episode. And I've only had like 2 people make the statement of I love my job. And I don't pose the question to anybody, but one of them was a pivot and the other one's in the trades. So they're completely different sides, and one pivoted into like specialty industry offshoot. But you don't hear that often. Like people explain what they do and they have a passion for it, but saying dream job or I love my job, I've more seen in people that have either struggled to figure out their right path, and when they find it, they're really excited, or they've pivoted off the traditional path or what people told them they had to do.
Yeah, I think for me, more than anything, I had been a Bluebeam user prior, and I saw the impacts it made, especially over COVID. Not to get too technical with like the feature sets that kind of were super popular over COVID, studio sessions. But I think seeing the impact that this piece of software makes for an entire industry and then being able to work for that company, I mean, when I started, it was kind of hard to explain to like family members who weren't in the industry, like who is Bluebeam, because they don't know. And it's like the Facebook of construction. Like everybody has heard of Bluebeam. Like it's just like that type of impact of a company. I think at the end of last year, we hit like 3 million worldwide users. Like that's awesome. That's so cool. And I think it's really cool to work with a software that has made such an impact. And then like you meet people and the first thing they say is, I think you might have said it when we jumped on the call, like, I love Bluebeam. You know, like I think that's a really cool reaction that people give. And I think that like I kind of feed off of that type of energy really a lot, honestly. So I think it's really exciting. Like you meet other people who are so excited about the software. Like, how dare I not be excited? Because like I'm really getting to do everything that I love, which is super exciting.
Yeah. And I love how many things it can do, because the studio sessions, you can interact with people across offices, across companies. But I've used the tool chests to do punch lists and then make them all active and pull out the data so it's intelligent with the rooms. I've done whole CA within Bluebeam, which I don't know if I would do again. That one was a little bit of a headache. I've done poll planning. I've done design iterations on there. I've gotten really fast at iterating my designs through Bluebeam rather than like Revit anymore because Revit's just going to give me errors. And I, for any Revit user, I thoroughly hate design options with a passion. So just doing a printout and having some stuff that I can move around in Bluebeam is so much faster for me as an architect to just design and iterate quickly
Yeah.
without having to be bogged down by other software. So it's like that was 5 seconds of me rattling off like 5 completely different ways to use the software for just an architect role.
Yeah.
So
that's funny. I had like a emotional reaction to you saying design options because we used to cover that as part
PTSD.
of our, yeah, some definitely some PTSD because we used to cover that as part of the course, and it was one of those that like you really didn't want to teach it because it was really hard to kind of work through, and from what I remember, sometimes could get like a little glitchy maybe, but yeah, good times. I do wish I could go back in time and like tell myself the Bluebeam tricks that I know now, because I would be unstoppable. But yeah, if anyone,
what's your favorite trick?
I know I was just about to like share it anyways. But my absolute favorite trick is visual search. I'll share two. Visual search, which I guess you know, but you can search for text. You can also search for an image. That's been one of my favorites. You can actually take the search and then turn it into a count, which I used to do a lot of because every so often I would like be asked to do like these really random takeoffs that I really didn't like doing because it just was so random. And I would always use visual search and it would always be confused like how I was turning them around so fast. And I would just like search the tags and then create the counts and then export it and like hand it in. They were always somehow more accurate than other people's.
Is the visual search you have to find a tag, or could you like if I wanted to get a chair count, and if I'm assuming I would have to do a visual of like, hey, this chair, and do a count within that document.
Yeah, you just kind of like create a rectangle over the chair, and then it will just like search the whole document for that image of that chair.
Does it tell you per page?
You can either do it by page or per document.
I love it. See,
yeah,
learned something new.
Yeah,
and now I'm gonna go play with it.
Yeah, that one's one of my like absolute favorites. I've gotten better at it. Like I didn't know about the count piece of it as much. I think when I was working and like a lot of the options there, I learned a lot more of that now. Or since I've started at Bluebeam. The other tip that I really love that I didn't know about and I wish I did, under help, the first thing is. It's called like search. It's got a little magnifying glass. That's actually a search bar. So you can actually type in whatever you want. So like you want to type in like compare or overlay, or you want to get like a rectangle, but you don't know where that is. You can just search for it, which saves me a ton of time because as you know, there's like so many buttons and I can never really remember where everything is.
Yeah.
So that search is kind of my other favorite little trick.
Yeah, even when I teach Bluebeam to young professionals, or my husband is a new Bluebeam user, and so like he switched companies and they use Bluebeam. I'm like, yes, you're finally in Bluebeam, and he'll ask me how to do things because he's doing takeoffs and bidding. So I'm kind of learning some of his stuff that he needs on the bidding side. I'm like, oh, okay, do this then and see what you need. But yeah.
You guys need to nerd out over visual search together. That's gonna be awesome.
Yeah. Too bad sometimes his stuff is like, I know I need to find this, but I haven't been able to find it anywhere. So he hasn't like found it yet. Whereas like if I'm doing design options, I have to do a chair count. And if it's like a giant conference room or a classroom space, then it's like sometimes you can have a lot of seats. That's like, okay, gotta like hand count. And that's what I was doing in Bluebeam. But now I don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah, so. Give it a go. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on it. But yeah, it's definitely one of my, I guess, like disclaimer, you should always check your results to make sure it isn't like 100% accurate, but it's pretty darn close. But yeah, it's a really cool, nifty little feature, especially to do like gut checks. So yeah.
And if you need something fast, like if you just did design iteration and I have to put some numbers out before I talk to an owner within an hour, like, hey, if I can do some quick counts and it'd be pretty darn close, and if I have time to cross-check the math, great. If not, at least it's like, well, we're about here. Worst case, round down one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's with that visual search, like you can add it to a count. You can also, and when you count it, it adds like a little check mark too. So you can kind of like zoom out and like take it. If you're just looking at one drawing, you can kind of like gut check, like, oh, it picked up almost all the chairs, or maybe it missed a bunch of chairs for some odd reason. But yeah, it's pretty cool. I really like that feature, and I feel like I always just share it with customers, and like I'm always surprised at how few people have like seen it or have used it. And yeah, I'm on a quest to get everyone to use visual search. So if you've used it, whoever's listening, like let me know. You can DM me and tell me how much you love it, and I can keep going on my mission.
Yeah. No, I know I'm going to share. So I'll let people know. I'll put a whole timestamp on free tip for Bluebeam.
Yes, there you go. People will love that. Bluebeam will love it too.
Yeah. Hey, Bluebeam, will you sponsor this episode?
Yeah, there you go.
We'll just give tips. And I like always wrapping up my podcast with this final question. And it's, what advice do you have for young professionals just starting their career?
Sure. I feel like I should have prepared something like really smart for this.
That's what the diploma is for.
That's fair. I know. Don't let this fool you. I didn't prepare for that question. I think more than anything, I wish someone had told me earlier in my career that it's okay to like something one day and then not like it the next day. And giving yourself permission to explore different things and to be vocal about it. Nobody can read your mind. It's not fair for you to expect your manager to know exactly what you want to do or be on this growth journey with you. It's great if they are, but for the most part, they're usually not, because they're their own person and they're on their own journey. So I think it's really important for each individual to really consider what's important to you, accept that those things will change as your life changes and grows, and be vocal about it with either the people at your company, but also kind of as you build out a network and sharing those thoughts with other people. Because I've learned that as much as we all like to think that we're all super unique, a lot of our struggles are really similar. Kind of like what we talked about, failing exams, like a lot of us, it's happened to a lot of people. And sometimes it's really nice to be able to connect with others about different things to kind of gut check, like, is this normal? So yeah, I think it's a couple different things that I wish that I had been told earlier in my career.
Yeah. And you have some great resources for highlighting through anything that you've struggled with to help others, which I know is one of my passions, in helping others through any of my struggles. So I always love connecting with other professionals doing similar things.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, if anyone listening to this has a question and you've kind of connected with this and kind of what I talked about, then feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and kind of chat. Like, I'm just a human. You can just reach out to me. That's totally fine. And yeah, I think and make that your thing, as you meet other people, connect with them, because everyone's just a human, except the bots. Those are bots.
Those are bots.
But yeah, that's, but thanks for pitching the resources again. I guess if you are wanting to career pivot, then definitely check out the guide. It was a labor of love, and I hope that it finds the right people who are on that journey.
Yeah. And if anybody's looking to get a hold of you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, definitely LinkedIn. You can slide into my DMs. I post a couple times a week. Try to be as consistent as possible, but usually about 3 times a week. All kinds of motivational things around pivoting, how-tos, my own experiences just as women working in corporate America or in the AEC industry. So if that resonates with you, then maybe hit me up with a follow.
Yep. And I'll leave your LinkedIn handle down below, and also a link to your resources. So quick access for anybody looking for some help.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that. And I really appreciate being on this podcast and kind of getting this opportunity to chat. And yeah, excited to hear how your use of visual search is going to go. And
yeah, I'll have to keep an eye on LinkedIn for your next visual search, and I'll put in snips and just be like, look what I did.
Can't wait to see it.
Yep. Thank you so much, Stefanie, for taking the time to speak with me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed our discussion today. Learn some advice to take with you and see how our industry is all tied together to create the world around us. Check out the description below for any links or resources we discussed. If you liked the episode, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up and leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support finding that career path that best works for them. If you know someone that has inspired your own career that you'd like me to interview, let me know in the comments below, or you can reach out to me via my website or LinkedIn. I'd be happy to share their story or your own. Thank you again, and I cannot wait for the next career story I get to share with you next week.